I would like to now welcome John Bottega, President of the EDM Council. John.
Thank you, Carol, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is John Bottega. I'm the President of the EDM Council. And there we go. So before we begin, I would like to take a moment to wish and hope that everyone is safe and healthy. It is becoming an overused expression, unprecedented times, but the expression is quite real. I hope you are doing your best to stay busy, stay informed, and are staying healthy. And it should go without saying, what you do as information professionals matters. Data is more important now than ever before. As we watch the world combat this virus, we can see how data is being used to inform, to track, and to predict the movement of the virus. We're seeing analysis being done not only by using data coming from hospitals, but by utilizing alternative types of data. IoT data from mobile phones, for example, to analyze how populations are moving across the globe, to better understand the movement and spread of the virus, and to come up with plans to defeat it. You may or may not be on the medical front lines, but what you are doing in your companies, using data to better understand your markets, your customers, and positioning your firms to best weather this storm is equally as important. So stay safe, stay diligent, and keep moving forward. We have a four-part agenda today. We're going to hear about why knowledge graphs are important. We're going to provide you with an update on the work that the EDM Council has been doing to support this effort. We're going to talk about how to advance the adoption and use of knowledge graphs, talk about our training and accreditation programs, and finally open up the Q&A, time permitting. Here are our speakers for the day. David Newman, SVP Innovation at Wells Fargo and Chair of our FIBO program. Mike Meriden, COO and co-founder of the EDMC. Robert Tricus and Paolo Garbaz, leader and co-leader of our program, both hailing from our partner, Mako Labs. Mako Lab has been a great partner in this effort, and you'll hear more about our partnership in the days to come. Jason Smith, hailing from another one of our important partners, Object Management Group, will be here today to say a few words. And of course, Dean Alamang and Lisa Kendall, both industry experts and established authors and leaders in our FIBO efforts from the very beginning. And finally, Harsh Shamar, who will introduce to us an interesting collaborative opportunity. And now I'd like to turn the mic over to David Newman.
Thank you very much, John, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. So many of you are heavily involved in making data better for your organizations, which is a critical function, but many constraints exist in our current organizations. We have many siloed organizations that create their own views and versions of data. We try to have standard definitions with glossaries, but they're highly incongruent. Coupled with that is a massive explosion of data. However, many of our goals to achieve our management of data objectives and our data enrichment objectives are hampered because we're using aging, standardless technology based on the relational model, which is about 50 years old. That results in many kinds of constraints where we end up having incongruent data models. We end up having proliferations of bespoke labeled columns where you might have 50 different spellings for this, of a label for the same meaning. We end up with insufficient metadata and siloed vendor platforms that manage our data environments, from glossaries to information models to physical database schemas and databases, etc. And this results in significant challenges across the board in how we manage data. One more click, John. Thank you. And this results in significant costs, inefficiencies, errors, failures to effectively comply with regulatory mandates, failures to effectively manage risk, and of course, most importantly, limited ability to serve customers. Let's go to the next slide. So faced with this current state, how do we transcend many of these problems? Well, what you'll hear about more and more today is knowledge graph. Knowledge graph is a significant capability that will transform how we manage data, how we enrich data, because it has a number of very profound capabilities. First of all, a common semantic language where we have the ability to describe the meaning of our concepts that not only humans can understand, but also machines can understand. It's an international global standard language stack, the semantic web language stack that underlies this common language. In addition, there is the ability to define reusable standards for data quality rules that are also executable that tap into the same model. This creates an environment where we're able to create a layer of knowledge over our physical data assets so that we can understand the concepts behind the data that we have in our many different data sources, which allows us to better search and understand and identify many of our data sources. And lastly, this capability provides for a very holistic, linked, integrated, harmonized view of our data. Let's go to the next. So this also gives us the potential to align data at rest in our databases and data in our message payloads, because standards exist through JSON LD to link back to the same common semantic language so that we eliminate many of the irreconcilable data across our environments. Also, having the ability, as I mentioned a moment ago, with data asset knowledge to better understand our physical data assets. This will also lead to improvements in regulatory compliance, reporting, and risk management. And lastly, it gives us an ability to create a very powerful bridge into AI and ultimately future-proof many of our business needs. This will reduce costs and errors due to greater efficiencies. It'll improve our insights. It'll help us better fulfill regulatory compliance, manage risk, and of course, ultimately better serve our customers. So the next step for everyone really is to learn about knowledge graph capabilities leveraging FIBO. And I'm going to pass it on to Mike Meriton, who's going to tell us more about this.
Thank you, David, and thank you for the case for knowledge graph. The question is, why knowledge graph? I think David has made an important statement, and this has been picked up as well by one of the leading industry analysts, Gartner Group, that for the top 10 data and analytics trends for 2019 going into 2020, today graph and data fabric are very, very important trends. Why is this the case? The largest digital companies in the world that are managing very vast sums of data across a varied landscape have all figured out that if you can link these data sets together, you are in the position to derive insights that otherwise are stopped using traditional technologies. Next slide, John. Where does FIBO fit into this? FIBO is the Financial Industry Business Ontology. It is hosted and supported by the EDM Council. We've been working on it for over 8 years. It reflects a direct investment over $5 million. What's really good news for everyone on this call is that FIBO is MIT open source, which means that for your company, whether you're an institution, a manufacturer, a vendor company, you are free and able to embed and use FIBO without any license fee. And then finally, most importantly, FIBO is an industry accelerator for graph initiatives, for your graph initiative. What do we mean by Open FIBO at this point and announcing this at this webinar? Open FIBO is essentially two things. Number one is extending FIBO to a broader open source development community, moving it out of the lab so that we can have subject matter experts contribute content, extensions, and new structures. How do we do that? We do that by focusing on business use cases that deliver the highest industry value. You'll hear a little bit further on this call, one of our colleagues, Harsh Sharma, that there's an opportunity for a shared lab that can extend FIBO further for solving business industry challenges across the regulatory and compliance landscape, for risk, for fraud, for customer 360, alternative data sets, and more. The next important activity of the Council is that the Council is an advocate of knowledge graph technology, and we see us as stewards of this capability to first, number one, provide the ability of knowledge graph awareness and training and certification programs so companies can, in scale, start to learn these capabilities and apply them in their businesses. Number two, we are in a position with FIBO and other industry ontologies to offer the industry business accelerators for common problems. And then number three, to support a community of knowledge graph advocates. With no further ado, what I'd like to do is introduce my colleague, Robert Trippus, who's going to explain to you the new capabilities we've now put in place for FIBO and for the community to easily access and leverage the technology. Robert?
Yep, thank you, John. Thank you, Mike, for the introduction. So my section of the presentation will be organized around the 4 foundational pillars of Open FIBO. Those are: 1, large and knowledgeable FIBO community consisting of subject matter experts, ontology experts, and representatives of companies that implement FIBO on their knowledge graph platforms or use it to solve real-life problems in the financial domain. 2, public, transparent, and well-documented FIBO development process organized on the GitHub platform. 3, stable and well-managed FIBO development and communication infrastructure that creates a user-friendly space for FIBO development and guarantees continuous integration of FIBO code into the FIBO repository. 4, the OMG standardization of FIBO that makes it a global standard. FIBO community is and has always been the most important pillar of FIBO. We should never forget that ontology, as defined by Nicola Guarino, is a formal specification of a shared conceptualization. So, creating functional that is good financial ontology always means finding consensus between parties that agree to share the way they see and talk about the financial domain. As I've learned from the older colleagues, FIBO evolved out of concerns that arose during the 2008 financial crisis among individuals who had been working together in data governance and management. The most pressing issue at the time was that they needed to have a shared common vocabulary that they could use within their institutions. After 11 years of FIBO development, the FIBO community has grown significantly. Currently, it has over 400 members on GitHub and over 4,400 members on EDM Connect platform. FIBO community is a part of a larger EDMC Open Knowledge Graph community that is currently being organized. New organization of the Open Knowledge Graph community will follow the following structure. On the top, we will have the Open Knowledge Graph Steering Committee that will be responsible for the strategic orientation of FIBO and any other EDMC ontology evolution. It will be also responsible for reviewing and approving new releases. Day-to-day ontology development is carried out by the community groups. Community groups are always ontology specific. Currently, we have got 2 EDMC community groups, FIBO and Auto. Each of them proposes, discusses, and prepares changes to their ontologies. Inside the FIBO and Auto communities, we have smaller working groups that focus on the development of a chosen part of ontology. In FIBO, the working groups are called FIBO content teams, FCTs in short. Currently, we have 3 active FIBO content teams that focus on derivatives, securities, and indices and indicators. In the near future, we are planning to restart FIBO launch content team meetings. Later in this webinar, Elisa Kendall will introduce us to the FIBO content teams. We will learn how FIBO content teams are organized and how they operate. And what's the most important, how to join existing FIBO content teams, or even how to organize your own working group. During this webinar, we won't talk about automotive ontology. It will be a subject of the next EDMC webinar. The second pillar of Open FIBO and Open Knowledge Graph is transparency. In January 2020, we made FIBO code publicly available on GitHub. It was released under the open source MIT license, which is very liberal, as Mike mentioned, and in practice allows anyone to modify and use FIBO for any applications freely. So we all benefit from FIBO development equally. We've also decided that any change to FIBO will be discussed publicly and openly. This means that everyone can propose an amendment to FIBO or express his or her concern or approval of the changes proposed by others. So I can say that FIBO development is now really in the hands of the members of the FIBO community. What this means is that it is decentralized, and all the future changes and extensions to FIBO really depend on the community needs. So if you want FIBO to evolve into a specific direction or you spotted some gaps in FIBO and you want to fill them, do not wait, be active on FIBO GitHub. So how can you be active? You can let the community know about the bugs and the gaps in FIBO. You can validate FIBO definitions and restrictions. You can get involved in the discussion, ask clarifying questions on recently open issues to move the discussion forward. You can answer questions for people on open issues. You can review FIBO code on other people's submissions. You can create an extension to FIBO. And finally, you can also call for a new working group and organize the meetings. To help you better understand FIBO and the principles we follow when developing FIBO, we've created FIBO documentation that consists of two main documents: ontology guide that contains principles of best practices, and the developer guide that tells you how to create your own FIBO extension. All these documents are freely publicly available on GitHub. So let me now show you how our GitHub space looks like and where you can find all the documents I have been talking about. Okay, after entering the FIBO GitHub space, you will find a list of directories that correspond to FIBO domains, so business entities, business processes, etc. RDF files with FIBO code are there. Then if you go a bit down, you will be welcomed by the README file. This is the very important file because it contains references to all the documents we've got in this space. So we start with introduction to FIBO, then you find our mission statement. You've got a link to our license, that is MIT license, and finally how to contribute. How to contribute section collects the most important documents. So first, code of conduct. Any member of our community is expected to uphold this code. Then developer certificate of origin, DCO. All contributions to FIBO should contain the sign off by statement. Contributors sign off that they adhere to the requirements of DCO. The text of DCO is here under this link. So if you click, you find the text. Of course, we've got no time to read this text right now. Then, as you know, FIBO development process follows rigorous and well-defined rules and principles that are described in two documents: contributing.md and ontology guide.md. Contributing.md is a file that we call often developer guide. Here you find all the groups of activities that you can be involved in. You also find information about FIBO content teams. Here you also find information about two publication ways of FIBO, so development and production. Production contains only ontologies that have been released, whereas development contains all the ontologies, also those that we are currently working on. We've got also maturity levels. Each FIBO ontology has one maturity level: release, provisional, or informative. We will also learn about our namespace policy. And what's the most important here is you also learn that any change to FIBO can be proposed via issues. What are the issues? If you go up, you find the second tab. The second tab has, let's say, all the issues that are currently open. So, as I said, you're welcome to join discussion. You can ask questions here. You can contribute to the discussion we've got currently on. Of course, you can choose the domain of FIBO you're interested in. So, for example, if you are interested in loans, you just pick this label. You can see that each issue has a label assigned. You click loan, and then you've got only the issues that are related to the FIBO loan domain. Then you find some issue you feel competent to contribute to, for example, the first one, and then you can, for example, discuss with Pete Rivet whether you agree that guaranteed loan should or should not be a subclass of secured loan. It will help us to understand better different views on the subject. After discussion, if we reach some consensus, we pick an issue and transform it into a pull request. Pull request is a real change that is proposed to FIBO. You can see that we've got currently more than 700 closed pull requests. Okay, each pull request proposes a real change to FIBO, and this is very important that each change to FIBO refers to exactly one issue from the list of the issues we have just talked about. So you can see description of the change that, for example, in this case, Lisa is proposing. You can see a reference to an issue this pull request is fixing or solving. You also see a checklist. So in this case, Lisa declares that is familiar with the FIBO developer guide, that her contribution follows the principles of best practice for FIBO and so on and so forth. Also, we can discuss here whether this pull request really solves this issue or not. If it solves, then it is accepted and the real change to FIBO is introduced. Also here, for example, if you are interested what kind of issues were, for example, discussed for the last 3 months, you go to the milestones, and where you can find, for example, 2020 Q1 FIBO release milestone, which collects all the issues that were, let's say, discussed and worked on for the last 3 months. All the issues constitute our new FIBO release that is currently being published on our website. Okay, so let me go back to the presentation. Perhaps I can also say anyone is allowed to create an issue. So if you click this button, you can just, report a bug. You can ask us, ask the whole community a question about FIBO and things like that.
Hey, Robert, just as a reminder to everybody on the call, as Robert and the rest of the presenters go through this, if you have any questions related to any of the topics, please enter those questions into the chat area, and we're going to do our best to respond to them. Even if we don't on this webinar, we're going to have written responses to every question that's posed. So please feel free to do that. Thanks, Rob. Continue.
Thanks,
okay.
John. And by the way, that is the questions section of the panel. Just there's a questions section. You can type your questions there.
Okay, thank you, guys. Okay, the third pillar of Open FIBO is development infrastructure. In 2008, FIBO started as a set of commonly used banking terms with definitions that were managed in spreadsheets on the Council's website. Since this time, a lot has changed. Today, FIBO is developed on GitHub. It is developed as an ontology in the standardized web ontology language, OWL in short. OWL is codified by the World Wide Web Consortium, and it is based on description logic. The use of logic ensures that each FIBO concept is framed in a way that is unambiguous and that is readable both by humans and machines. Using OWL also allows for implementing hygiene tests that protect us from spoiling FIBO with bad practices. Introducing new changes to FIBO is organized according to continuous integration practice that allows for automatic FIBO building and verification. The green picture on the slide shows the chain of actions that are automatically initiated and carried out by Jenkins after a change is introduced to FIBO on GitHub via pull request. First, we check whether the new changes are compliant with the principles of best practices that are implemented in the form of hygiene tests. Then the ontology is built in different serializations. In the further steps, FIBO-derived products such as FIBO vocabulary or FIBO data dictionary are generated, and everything is finally published on the FIBO website. Speaking of the FIBO website, it is also a part of our infrastructure. It is a very simple website, but contains everything that is needed to understand how to contribute to FIBO. And to understand FIBO, first, let me refer to the documents I've been talking about when I was walking you through the GitHub space. So all the documents I was talking about, so license, developer certificate of origin, README file, developer guide, ontology guide, code of conduct, all of these documents are collected here on our website on the one page under how to contribute. Then how our community is organized, you find on this page FIBO groups. So here you'll find that we've got FIBO steering group and FIBO community group and FIBO working groups. What is important, we also publish release notes. So every time we publish a new version of FIBO, we have a very detailed description of everything that has changed for the last 3 months. So last 2020 Q1 FIBO release is already on our page. So it's a short introduction where, described in a very general way what has changed. Then we've got very detailed description of each issue that were discussed and finally, published by pull request. Then FIBO Viewer. FIBO Viewer is something we're really proud of. FIBO Viewer allows you to browse to access FIBO in the easiest possible way. So we've got a search feature. So if you're interested in some concept, you can just type its name, for example, legal entity, and then you can just check whether this concept is already in FIBO. If it is, you will find it on this list. Then you can go to the concept and you will find a very detailed description of the concept as it is in FIBO. So first you find a taxonomy. For example, from this part, we learned that legal entity is legal person and formal organization. Then we've got a glossary part where we've got natural language description of the concept, so definition, synonyms, source of the definition, examples, and scope note. Then we've got more specific concepts to the legal entity, like corporation or trust. Of course, you can click and you will get a description of this concept. Then we've got restrictions that are very important for ontology. Restrictions contribute to better understanding of the concept. So for example, the first restriction says that legal entity has exactly one legal address that is conventional street address. All the restrictions, both that are specific for the concept and the restrictions that were inherited from the parent classes or all upper classes, are then taken together on the diagram. The diagram describes required and optional links between concepts. So for example, if we just focus on the required concepts for legal entity, then we'll find that if you build a model for legal entity, then you have to specify jurisdiction this legal entity is organized in. You have to specify legal name of this legal entity and also its legal address. That is of type conventional street address. If you're wondering what is conventional street address, you click and then you learn everything about this concept. Please notice that we've got also instance data here. So for example, you can, let's say, see how London Stock Exchange headquarters address looks like. So if you click here, our picture will show a very detailed description of this instance data. On the left-hand side, you see a list of FIBO domains. So if you're interested, for example, in loans, you can access this particular domain and go down to the modules. And finally, below the modules, you've got ontologies. You may wonder what the colors mean. Green means that ontology has been released, okay? And the yellow one, it means that it's under development. Green modules mean that all the ontologies that belong to this module have been released. The same applies to FIBO domains. If you find some domains or modules that are green, yellow, it means that in the scope of this particular domain or module, you've got ontologies that are both at the same time. You find ontologies that are green and yellow. So yellow means we have to work on this, okay? So many people ask about loans, so you can see that we have no single ontology from this domain that have been released. So our community should organize perhaps a working group to really move some of these ontologies from the development state to release state. Okay, this is FIBO Viewer. Then our products. Currently, we have 3 FIBO products. FIBO OWL is actually a FIBO ontology with restrictions. You can find here a file with all imports that you can get from outside, or you can download a zip file with all the ontologies that you can run locally on your machine. Then we've got FIBO SCOS vocabulary. It is a simplified version of FIBO containing links between concepts plus definitions and labels. We've got no restrictions here. And finally, we also have FIBO Data Dictionary. Sometimes I call it FIBO in tables, where we collect a list of FIBO concepts plus definitions and some examples and explanatory notes. So all the products are here. Then we've got a very interesting education section. Here we've got courses. I believe that Dean and Mike will talk about them later, so I will not take your time. Just note that the courses and all the description modules, dates, course palette, and also a training instructors profile are here. And then we've got also a list of useful use cases that our working groups are working on. Here you only find abstracts, short summaries of the use cases. If you want to get more info about the use cases, you should go to the wiki space. So you click this link, then you will be directed to the wiki space where you find more information about use cases and some instance data. And finally, this is very important section, partners, sometimes called external. Here we collect everything that is related to FIBO. This section is intended to promote FIBO through products and solutions that use FIBO. So here, currently we've got just 2 things like FIBO SCOS, FIBO schema.org, that is a financial extension to FIBO. This delivery to schema.org allows people to mark up financial product on the websites. And we've got also Financial Industry Business Data Model. It is a product delivered by Jürgen Zimmer. I hope we will have more products here in this section. So we are asking you to submit your FIBO use cases and demos. We'll be happy to publish them on the FIBO website in this particular section. This will, this will promote your products. It will promote FIBO, and I believe it will promote knowledge graphs and semantics in general. Okay, and the 4th pillar is FIBO standardization. I like to invite Johnson Smith to say a few words about it.
Great, thank you, Robert. As Robert said, I'm Jason McCollum-Smith. I'm Technical Director of the Object Management Group, and I've been asked to say a few words about the history and the future of the collaboration between ourselves, the OMG, and the EDMC. The FIBO community has been doing development under the support of the EDMC for over 8 years. And for 7 of those years, OMG has worked with EDMC to provide a smooth transition path to an openly published global standard via our standardization processes at the OMG. We feel this has been a very successful partnership between OMG and EDMC, and we very much look forward to the continued collaboration. OMG is a well-known global standards body with a strong reputation for transparency, fairness, and above all, governance of our processes. And we are very proud to offer continued and increased support to the FIBO community. And we'll continue to look for ways to create new paths to strengthen the open collaboration that we have with the EDMC on FIBO. Despite the already large success of FIBO, we believe this is just the start for the community. And to give you more detail of this vision of open collaboration within the FIBO community, I'd like to turn it over to someone I've had the pleasure of knowing for several years through the OMG, and that's Elisa Kendall of Thematics Partners.
Thanks so much, Jason, and it's lovely to be here and happy to see so many folks are interested in the work that we've been doing. What I'd like to share with you today is a little bit about the FIBO content teams that I've been working with over the last several years. We have 3, it's really 4, as you can see from the top bullet, the 3 active groups, each of which is working towards completion of several use cases. So for the Financial Business and Commerce and Securities Working Group, our focus is on master data for instrument representation. And most recently in the Q1 release, we've included a new pricing ontology. We have a number of examples, how to represent an organization, how to represent their legal entity identifier, how to represent the stocks that they issue, and how to build up more instrument data about those stocks. And so those examples, as Robert pointed out, are actually included in our released FIBO. Then in the derivatives group, which David Newman chairs, our focus has been primarily on standardized regulatory reporting to date. We're also looking at further use cases regarding counterparty exposure. And next quarter, our release will include some example swap data that folks can use in order to map their information to our ontologies. And finally, in our Indices and Indicators Working Group, we've had some tremendous success working with a number of statistical organizations in the US, the Bureau of Labor Statistics in Canada, Statistics Canada participated, along with a number of other folks. Our focus originally was on economic indicators, and now we are really working very hard on market indices. We have examples in the FIBO release of how to represent the constituents of the Dow Jones Industrial Average. We've been working jointly with the securities team on pricing, and once we have solidified our index definition, we're going to be working on how those indices move and constituents of corporate actions that actually impact those indices. Next slide. So the approach, as Robert mentioned, is use case driven. Summaries are on the council website. The more detail about our use cases is in our working group wikis. The development guide that we've published is available on the website, as Robert mentioned. And all of our work stems from the use cases, preliminary terminology work leading into those. We have naming conventions, modeling policies and best practices, some quality guidelines, all in our ontology guide. We have a growing number of automated tests that Dean Alamang and others have been implementing that ensure that the resulting ontologies meet our requirements and policies. And the working groups are using GitHub. We are continuously using the wiki. We document the notes from our meetings. Anyone is welcome to take a look at those. and we would love to help you organize another group. The council will help with GoToMeeting and the wiki, and those of us who've been in the trenches for a long time are happy to help you get all set up there. Thanks, Robert.
Elisa and Jason and Robert, thank you guys. Great overview. We're going to turn this now back over to Mike. Let me see if I can get the screen back. Carol, I think you have to give the screen back to me. There we go. Mike, you should see your slide up now.
Yeah, I'm all set, John. Thank you very much. And thanks to Elisa and the team for describing the FIBO open community. You'll see a really exciting list of companies on this slide, which is they all are diverse organizations. Each of these companies have done something related to leveraging FIBO in their solutions. These are both member and non-member companies as well, because the council supports this community at large. The thing that we have is a call to action. If your company's on this list, or if your company should be on this list, we're asking for companies to submit business use cases and sample data sets that we can publicly share on the EDM Council, FIBO, and our overall website. We're also, by the way, opening up the website to other industry ontologies. Robert, a little bit earlier, mentioned that we are launching an automotive ontology, and we are working with other industry sets to add in more. Again, our advocacy is for the industry use of ontologies as accelerators, and we believe that's one of the best ways to advance awareness and generate momentum. What I'd like to do at this point, John, is introduce a colleague, Harsh Sharma, around an interesting opportunity that we'd like to frame for all of the participants in the webinar. Harsh, over to you.
Thanks, John and Mike, for the opportunity to participate. Good day to all. In the interest of time, let me just summarize a few thoughts on how a EDMC hosted Open Knowledge Graph Lab can add further value. Moving on, okay, that's the slide. Thank you. I'm not going to dwell on the 2008-9 financial crisis and the numbers. Of course, one critical lesson we learned was that our global financial system was opaque, and we could no longer afford ongoing lack of transparency and trust in our financial data. Now we fast forward to 2020. This time a virus triggers a global health and financial crisis, and we are struggling to stitch together a holistic view of the adversary, epidemiology, therapeutics, and overall impact and business risk, and how we should respond. From a data management and analytics angle, lack of comprehensiveness and availability of granular data and trust, and need to balance that against data privacy and protection laws is also holding us back. So net-net, what we urgently need is to develop holistic, continuous intelligence approach to deal with this crisis, and also leverage that capability and infrastructure we might develop to pivot back to business growth. And this is where I feel leveraging knowledge graphs can add significant value. Next slide, please. Thank you. Let's look at the knowledge graph landscape. There is some perception out there that it's not ready for prime time, not much enterprise adoption, demonstration of business value, etc. Which you can see on the left of this slide, the early pioneers have built highly successful businesses that are powered by knowledge graph technology. In the middle and on the right, what you see is few practitioners I have listed, not a complete list, and the kind of knowledge graph use cases they have been working on. Of course, some of these I have been personally involved in architecting and delivering. The key message, therefore, is there are some early stage use case driven organizations, and others are investing heavily into graph-powered architecture across their enterprise. There are consultancies and their alliance partners establishing knowledge graph center of excellence practice areas, developing knowledge graph libraries, widgets on a marketplace, graph as a managed service, etc. So a lot of good stuff happening out there. Next slide, please. So here's what we're thinking about regarding the Graph Lab. Obviously a member-driven open ecosystem that connects the graph consumers, enablers, makers of the technology, and the commercial marketplace app stores that are starting to emerge. This lab will focus on developing a reference knowledge graph architecture best practices, promote and track enterprise adoption KPIs, industry standards, for example, for graph query, performance, scalability, etc. Most important, this group will identify what are the top 3 to 5 knowledge graphs that are vendor agnostic, of highest immediate, perhaps something like a COVID 360 with financial risk impact assessment, etc. And also, of course, some of the knowledge graphs that may be of longer term value, available in a sandbox or a test bed where participants can do the fast track evaluation and be able to leverage these knowledge graphs in their respective organizations. Mike, with that, I'd like to turn it over to you regarding the next steps Council is planning. Thank you for everybody's time. Be safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thanks, Harsh. And this is an exciting idea. We've been approached by quite a few companies around this concept of a shared lab that will mutualize the development to solve specific business problems. So this is an open invitation to everyone that's on this call. If your company is an institution, a financial services firm, a manufacturing, an insurance company, and you're interested in working already with semantic and knowledge graph technology or planning to do that, or if you're a vendor company that sees the promise of this technology and your architecture leverages the different formats that you can now download FIBO and other industry ontologies, this is an opportunity to join and build a common shared lab for the industry. We see 2 steps, keeping it simple, moving forward in Q2 and early Q3, business planning and development sessions where we can develop and socialize the proposal of the charter, the operating model, the governance, the deliverables, also identify founding members and the funding commitment to the lab, and as well the business use cases that would bring the most immediate value, and then as well to generate interest and bring white papers back into the industry with an objective by the end of the year to operationalize and launch the lab. If you are interested in participating or learning more about this or participating in these planning sessions, please complete the survey at the end of this session, or you can reach out to any of the presenters today or John and myself, and we will let you know when that first planning session will be scheduled, likely in the month of April or early May. The next thing I'd like to share with you on the next slide, John, is a little bit about the knowledge graph training and certification courses. This is the planned curricula that we are going to be bringing to market. Dean, if you could take a moment, this will be delivered as a consecutive 2-day virtual course, 6 hours each day. Dean, you want to just describe the 2-day agenda?
Sure, Mike. Yeah, so we've based this agenda on courses that we have done at various client locations and in conferences. So some of you on the call may have actually participated in some of these. We've split it into 2 days to accommodate remote presentation. It's a bit difficult to sit down for an entire day when you're doing remote presentations. And we start off with business case and market adoption. So a lot of what Harsh was talking about, what are we doing with knowledge graph? When is that the right thing to do and why? Then we talk about the actual technical architecture of knowledge graphs. How do they work? And for this course, we do a deep dive into FIBO as an example of an enabler for a knowledge graph. And so we can actually get into the specifics. And finally, do a hands-on exercise where you can actually see how a knowledge graph works. Obviously, with some manufactured data, we aren't able to do that with a real system. But the system is pretty indicative and gives you a feeling for how a knowledge graph differs from some of the ways you may have been managing data in your enterprise, or in the way that David Newman outlined at the very beginning of this webinar, how it is that data feels different when it's in a knowledge graph than it does in a lot of the systems that David described. And then, of course, a summary and accreditation. We actually have a path through the course where we validate that students have gone through this, and so we can accreditate with your that you have in fact completed the course. So I think I'll go back to you, Mike.
Thank you, Dean. So that we can make this highly available, we're in the month of May offering 3 different virtual classes for 3 different global geographies. For May 5th and 6th, the Americas, the class will run from 8 to 2 p.m. Pacific, which is also 11 to 5 p.m. Eastern over the 2 days. For the APAC region on May 12th and 13th, We will be running a session to cover countries like Singapore, Japan, Australia, and others. And for UK, EMEA, and India, if you're interested in this, you can just go to the EDM Council website, or when we distribute this deck and all of the Q&A afterwards, everyone will be receiving an email, so you don't have to worry about having taken notes. You can just click below where you say the click here, and you can register directly for the course. So thanks, Dean, for covering that, and hopefully no matter where you are in the world, these courses are now open and available and starting up within the next 30 days or so. Next slide, John. So at this point, we're going to go to some Q&A. The very first question that I would like to frame, because we just covered these courses, is to Dean Alamang. So Dean, is this a course for business people or technical or operation? You know, and are there prerequisites? So who does this apply to?
So we're really aiming this at a general audience, so it involves business folks and technologists. There's a bit of technology in it, as you saw, but it's not a deep dive that requires a lot of technical prerequisites. The real aim of this is that if there's somebody who knows a good data model when they see it and understands the importance of data to their enterprise, that they should have what it takes to find their way through this course. So we don't require heavy-duty technical expertise or heavy-duty business acumen, but more of a motivation for how this changes the way you think about data in your enterprise.
Thanks a lot, Dean. A question over to David Newman. David, what type of use cases, when up and running, deliver the most value for Knowledge Graph? And if companies are thinking, and individuals on this call, what are some really high impact opportunities? What are the characteristics of those use cases?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So at some point in time, well, today, for example, very few people ask, well, what is the use case for a relational database? It's almost assumed. I'm going to predict that at one point in time, people are not going to ask about the use case for a knowledge graph because it's going to be well understood. But what are the prerequisites? What are the challenges where a knowledge graph is best suited? So there are quite a few. One of them would be to extend and enrich and express enterprise glossaries in a form of a knowledge graph. So, which is also a good way for companies to get started, is to leverage FIBO and use it as a conceptual scaffolding for your enterprise data view, and start to integrate, create your own enterprise ontologies based on FIBO, so that you could reuse and align with an industry standard, as well as at the same time add your own enterprise extensions. So creating that is a very important first step. That could then transition into creating what I called earlier a layer of knowledge over physical data assets, where you can then begin to connect your highly diverse sets of columns and tables and database labels into your knowledge graph, so that you could link your enterprise concepts to the ways that they're physically represented in the data sources. And then that now positions you to ingest data from differing sources. So some of the use cases where it's a really good fit is when the nature of the use case requires a network of information for the data. So this could be reflected in customer 360 holistic profiles, where you see a network of relationships between customers and other customers and accounts, etc. Next is, I would say, a payments network, where you can link all kinds of payees and payers for a variety of needs for predicting money laundering and other kinds of risks, fraud, etc. Business process networks, where you can link and integrate your various business processes, and then technology assets networks, where you can look at all the different assets in your technical infrastructure and then link that back to your business processes so that you could determine when there are failures in the technology infrastructure, how does it impact the business? And another one, a really good one, would be in the capital markets area, where you can specify a derivatives trading network and identify counterparty risk, et cetera. Well, this is a whole seminar in its own right. We could talk a long time about the differing use cases. So this should be plenty to get everyone started. So I'll turn it back to you, Mike.
Thanks, Dave. I think the key takeaway from me in listening is wherever you have the ability to bring networks of data together across what would have been silos, it allows you to derive insight in ways you could never do in some of the legacy architectures. So I think that's a great insight. There is a question here I'd like to frame. It came in from Julian. Robert, this would go to you, I believe. Can you view the ontology and propose a change specific to the section of the ontology in context?
This is a very difficult question, in fact, because, you know, as far as FIBO is concerned, FIBO is free of context. Okay, so it's like we have like one snapshot. Okay, we describe the current state without taking into account changes. Okay, so context is not included into FIBO now. That's my answer.
Understood. And another question, this is from Jürgen. Great overview, Robert. How do users know what has changed in FIBO production versus what might be in the release notes so that they can differentiate between production and development?
Perhaps the easiest and a user-friendly way to really understand what is already in production and what is under development is to go to the FIBO viewer and to really understand which ontologies have, you know, a green color close to its title, and which one, you know, have the yellow one. Yellow means that these ontologies are under development. Okay, currently are under development. The green one have been released. Okay, so this is the easiest possible way to understand that. Release notes are always published after we, you know, deliver the new FIBO product. So each quarter you find release notes on our website, so you can really understand what have changed for the last 3 months. Thank you.
Okay, there's quite a few other questions. I just wanted to let everyone that typed their questions in that we are going to now be wrapping up this webinar because we're at the top of the hour. We will be issuing an email that will include a recording of this, access to the slides that were presented, and as well answers to everyone's questions. So everyone, thank you for entering your questions. What I'd like to do now is turn the floor over to John, our president, for a final wrap up. John?
Thanks, Mike, and thank you to all the speakers. Thank you for all the attendees. Just quickly, what we'll call the call to action. Please visit the website and join the community. Robert and team did a great job in describing ways and Lisa to contribute and to get involved. You see links on this page. If you have an interest in the strategic collaboration that Harsh discussed, again, reach out to us, email Mike Meriden directly, his email is there, or respond to the survey. And if you're interested in the classes, there's the link right there, right to the registration for the live virtual classes we've been running. We are asking you to complete a simple survey. You can either click on it or use your cell phones and scan the QR code. It's a quick survey, but we would love to get your feedback on what was discussed and the direction that we're taking with the council. So with that, Mike, and we're at the top of the hour, I want to thank everybody for your attendance and contribution. Our next webinar will be June 3rd. We'll be sending out information and invitations to that. Everybody, please be healthy, be well, stay the course. We will get through this, and we'll continue to provide support to our membership now and in the future. So thank you, everybody, for attending, and have a great day.